right, welcome back to another episode of High Flyer TV. Before we get started, I want to let you all know that the opinions and ideas shared are strictly ours and not the opinions or ideas of the 338th Recruiting Squadron. Today, we have TSgt Schlickenmeyer back for our initial appointment series. And today we're going to discuss flight policies and timelines to make sure that your appointments are on the same page as you each step of the way. So without further ado, TSgt Schlickenmeyer, welcome back. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. How about yourself?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good. You know, the weather's getting better. Being up here in the north, it's not as fun during most months, but spring, summertime, those are my months right there.
No, man. We get out of the office a little bit more, maybe hit up the zone rather than trying to stay in, bundled up, stay warm. So I get it.
Exactly. All right, man. Well, hey, man, last episode, you shared some good information about controlling appointments. We had some great dialogue, and I hope individuals learned from that. Today, we're really going to talk about some important things that they don't really teach in recruiting school. So, when it comes to timelines, when it comes to your flight policies, we talk about impact, but we don't discuss when it comes to the mechanics of processing and how your flight operates and how the squadron may need to control, the job process and all the things like that when it comes time to reserving careers. So, what's your experience with that, and how's your flights policy in that regard?
Yeah. So, you start from the beginning, right? Especially if you're a new recruiter, you need to understand your flight policy. Talk with your flight chief. Each flight has a different one. So, what me and Sergeant Kendrick might talk about, it might be different in your flight. So, make sure you get with your flight mates and your flight chief to know exactly what yours is. But for ours, right? For the flight policy, if it comes really down to the processing time windows and things like that, job policies to, what's expected of that applicant from the beginning. So with that, right, if they're like a clean pre-screen, simple pre-screen, they should be going up to MEPS the next available day. So you should be waiting out 2 weeks to send them up to MEPS. There really shouldn't be any huge issues that come up to where they have to reschedule or do anything like that. Like, you need to make sure you say like, hey, these are the times that you can go up to MEPS. You can open up, once you get them through that process of your initial appointment, you can open up the window and see what your MEPS schedule looks like, and go from there. And that's what I do. I open up once I'm done with the initial appointment, we sign all the forms. I'm like, all right, next step is to get you up to MEPS. And here's some days that are available. And usually I'll try to pick 2 days for them. Like, hey, if these 2 days don't work for you, or if it's full, then the next 2 days are going to be your days. So you're on that same page. They see it, you see it, you can kind of explain the reasons why. But that's up front. They got to understand that they're not going to be dragging their feet for the next week or two, trying to stall and go into MEPS or whatever. And then with the job policy, for us, we list 12 jobs in 2 aptitude areas. And depending on if they're low qualified, which means, I wouldn't say low qualified, minimum qualified on that side of it, it's that they have to list security forces, right? They have to qualify for security forces to be able to dep in. So that's something you need to share with them as well, especially if they scored kind of low on the APT and you're going to go send them up to one stop. They'd be like, hey, you got to understand, you got to get at least a 31 overall, but a 30 in the general category to be able to qualify for the Air Force. So that's our policy and stuff like that too. So you gotta make sure you set them up for success, that you're not blindsiding them when they're up at MEPS or when they get back and you do your job counseling and they're like, what? I got all these 12 jobs, and then explain the aptitude areas too, very in detail on the initial appointment as well. Because they're gonna come up, and you want to have that conversation early in the process as possible, not after they've already signed their contract at MEPS. Because then they're like, oh man, he's not giving me all the information later on, after I've already decked in, right? So make sure you're setting them up for success on that way too. Anything kind of different for your flight policy, Sergeant Kendrick?
No, so ours pretty much the same. Our flight chief considers a person that's not qualified for at least 6 of the jobs that are needed. So we have a list of the careers that are usually available based on the yearly accession plan. And if a person is not qualified for at least 6 of those, they're considered minimally qualified. And at that point, they have to list everything that they qualify for. And, like Sergeant Schlickenmeyer is saying, we have to make that transparent from the beginning. So don't be afraid to talk about aptitude areas, about how the process works, because those things are inevitable. You can't really change those things. Also, with waivers, if an individual's a wavered applicant, for us we're doing a waiver for them. In return, they have to be flexible when it comes to filling short notice fields and filling careers that we need to fill in case somebody has an injury, etc. So understand your flight policy and don't be afraid to express and explain it to your applicants, because you should have a copy of it in your office to further justify your claims. But also, you should just be able to explain it to them as well, and not be afraid of a challenge on that or them asking questions, because the policy is the policy. I usually tell applicants that the way the process works is something that's not going to change. It's a constant. Mm-hmm. But the variables are what you qualify for, your ASVAB scores. Those are the things you can really somewhat control. But the way the process is going to work, you have to be okay with that. And if you're not, then unfortunately, maybe this isn't the right branch for you. Okay. So make sure you're really following those policies. But we do 12 and 2 as well. I mean, and honestly, if you have a flight policy, but you want to beef it up some more, I mean, hey, tell them it's 14 and 2. Why not? Mm-hmm. It's just going to increase their odds of reserving jobs, because we start off as 10 and 2. And then I was saying 12 and 2. So we kind of adopted that 12 and 2, because why not add more if you can? So pretty much the same.
And then, and kind of one thing, like you said, you want to add a little bit more to it. I kind of you have to put in at least 4 or 5 mechanical or electrical career fields. So especially if they're, so for us as well, they can only list 2 medical or admin jobs, right? Jobs that are super hard to get, right? So it limits them from listing all medical jobs out of those 12 jobs. And then it still is back to, okay, you can only really book about 3 of your jobs you put on your list. So that kind of makes it even, makes them more successful in booking, but also makes it so that they understand it from the beginning that we're here to make sure that they're successful in the process, not that they sit here for 5-6 months before they even book a job. So that's another thing. You gotta make sure that the timeline, you explain the reasons how jobs are booked too. Like, we can't get a job the Air Force is not hiring for, just like every other business. We can't have everyone in the Air Force be like a firefighter like I was. We gotta have mechanics and cops and all that other stuff. You gotta qualify for the career field. So we can't get your job you don't qualify for. You can't keep your job leaving before you can leave, right? So the earlier you're put on the availability day, the more jobs that are available to you. So that's another way that you can make them flexible too. And then outside of that, it's their personal preference. So they do have a lot of say in what they want to do. But unfortunately, they can't be like, I want that job, right? So just one thing that I found out that makes it a little bit easier. And plus, like, I have that flight policy printed out and highlighted those areas, and it's sitting on my desk. So when I ask them or tell them that stuff, I'm like, hey, it's our flight policy. Everybody who sits at that desk, they fill out the same policy. So it's not just me, right? It's everybody who has to do this, because we want to make sure that you're successful in this process.
Yes, definitely. And speaking on that point, one thing an old flight chief told me, which was very important, I was getting caught up in trying to please everyone, every appointment I had, and make sure that I was able to get them their top job and everything. And he told me, he said, the most important stakeholder in this process is the Air Force. Okay, so the everybody is important, your applicants, but it's a healthy balance, because your job is still to be an Air Force recruiter. You're not the applicant's name recruiter. You're an Air Force recruiter. So what you're recruiting for is the Air Force. Okay, so make sure that when you're conducting these appointments, try to always have that healthy balance of, hey, I'm going to try my best to make sure that the applicant is getting something that they are remotely interested in, maybe that area, but they still have to be okay with what the Air Force is looking to fill. Because if that doesn't align, what it's going to do for you is it's going to make you unsuccessful as a recruiter, and you're not going to make go. And you may have a lot of people you're recruiting, but they're not listing what the Air Force need is. And just always related back to you being in the Air Force, we all understand how important the mission is. So we still have a mission to accomplish, and you have to get them prepared. And I always tell them too, hey, this is the way it works in the Air Force your whole career. So this is the first point where you really have to be okay with this. So if you're not okay with this, the way this process works, you're not going to be okay with how things work in the future. Because I'll tell them, hey, this is my ninth year, and when I submitted my assignment preference list, I still had to make a preference list of 8 locations. It wasn't like I got to pick. So even 9 years later, you're still going to have to make preference lists based on what's available. So just kind of setting that tone for them, and if they're not willing to accommodate that, then it might not be the best thing for them. This may not work for them.
Right. What my flight chiefs always told me is you got to be willing to step away from the cell, right? So this person may want to join the Air Force, but they're making all these demands like, I don't want to list 12 jobs. I want my number one job, or, I want to go to MEPS in 2 weeks, not next week. Or you got to be willing to be like, all right, if you're not going to follow the steps and the process that I'm laying out before you, then you're just not going to be able to join the Air Force at this time, right? Even if you're kind of looking at not making goal or something like that, you got to really think about it. Do you want this person in your depth? Do you want this person in the Air Force who is demanding things from you? Especially someone who hasn't even made it through basic training yet, and they're talking to an NCO like, "No, you're going to do what I say," and that's just not, that attitude's not going to fly. And so a potential can down the road. Especially if they don't get their number one job, they're disgruntled, and then they're telling everybody else in your depth, or whatever it can be, you got to be willing to step away from it. Don't get caught up with you're the servant to them, right? You're here to serve them. You're here to definitely make sure that they're successful in the process. But you can't just bend the knee and do whatever they ask. It's just not going to work. And really, we can't even do that anyways. We don't have that much power as a recruiter anyway.
We really don't. I mean, I'm transparent with them. I tell them all the time, hey, just so you know, me and you, we have a lot of control over scheduling your ASVAB, preparing for that, making sure you get all your paperwork done. But when it comes to you going to MEPS and you actually having to qualify with the MEPS doctors and then you reserving a career, hey, that's where our control stops. So just know me and you are in this together, but I'm being transparent with you on what we have control over. And you want to set that tone because they will think that you have the almighty power to get them anything and everything they want if you don't draw the line. And then that's where you set yourself up for failure, because you really don't have that stuff. And you really don't want, like Sergeant Schlickenmeyer said, you don't want to be so invested in, hey, I got to make goal, that you're still not realizing that also as an Air Force recruiter, you're trying to find the best fit for the Air Force. And if this person isn't going to be willing to listen or accommodate to the process, they may not be the best fit. And later on down the road, there's still going to be a can. It's no point in making goal if they're all going to be cans anyway. We're still going to lose a body. So making sure that, you're making those correct decisions at the beginning. And if you're confused, always consult with your flight chief or your flight mates, so that way you can get a different perspective on, hey, is this person a good fit? Am I looking at this correct? Or, hey, do I need to take a step back and just be okay with not selling this person, which sometimes that's okay.
Right. And I know we wanted to talk about the timeline processes and stuff like that, or processing for the timeline stuff. Like once they're done with the initial appointment, right? You sign all the forms, right? You pick a day to get up to MEPS, or, if you got to do a med read, you're like, hey, the med read's going to be done today. I'm going to send it up tomorrow or whatever. Let them know once that doctor says the CMO says you're good to go, I'm going to call you and we're going to schedule a day. All right. So be ready on that side of it, but also you got homework to do, right? You got to do the AFSEP, you got to do your background investigation stuff, and make sure you set a deadline. Usually I like to say, make sure, like if they're a simple pre-screen, you're getting that stuff done tonight, right? Because I want to be able to submit you for MEPS tomorrow morning, because we all know MEPS only looks at those things, at like between 6:30 and 7 o'clock in the morning, so if you don't make it by that time, you ain't getting scheduled until the next day. So I like to make sure they get done. If they're like, I know they're going to need a med read, I'm like, all right, like get it done by Friday. Or like my appointment yesterday, he's a med read. So I was like, you need to have it done by 9 o'clock Monday morning. All right. And then the AFWIN link as well. It's like, hey, you need to have that done by 9 o'clock Monday morning. All right. No excuses. All right. If you're having issues, let me know Friday. but you gotta make sure you get it done. And then if they're gonna take the PICAT, then make sure they have that PICAT done at a certain time as well, and all that stuff. So make sure you're setting them up for success from the earliest point in the process as possible, that they understand what's going to happen next. So when they come back and they're like, "Oh yeah, I didn't get my background investigation stuff done," but we had that conversation in the office. What's going on, right? And so you can gauge on what's the issue. Were they just being lazy? Do they not care as much as you thought they did? Or are they having second thoughts? Like you can bring up those valid issues on reasons why they didn't get a simple task done. Or if it's like, hey, they tried to do it, but they couldn't because the website's wonky or whatever, right? Well, why didn't you let me know that? I told you to let me know if you're having any issues. So you can kind of gauge what kind of applicant is going to be. That's when the process is starting to rely on them, right? Them to do the things that they need to do to be successful, right? Doing the asset stuff's kind of out of your hands, right? You can't, you can go in and knock it out, but it's not gonna be right. So you got to make sure that they're doing the things to be successful, and that gauges their level of commitment early on in the process before you get too invested where they're, a debt member, and then now they got a job, and now you get a can or an in week or whatever, right? Later down the road because of whatever reason. So,
Yeah, definitely. I mean,
good.
Speaking on that timeline too, I mean, I think it's important, just saving time to do all of the things, as much things as you can prior, and setting them up. So like with me, when I set an appointment, I send an appointment text. That appointment text has our website in there. So they're mandated to watch the ID2A on the website, as well as the squadron PSA that explains potential timelines. So they're watching those too. So that way when they come into the office, they already have that tone set that, hey, I'm already going to be in a professional environment. I understand the timelines a little bit. And they also watched a video by Jody with the Y about what to know prior to meeting with Air Force recruiter. And that video really sets the tone for them to know, hey, what's already going to happen. So that way, when they come into your office, when you explain these things, you're not really having to push a lot because they already understand, hey, this is kind of what I watch and how it's going to go. So making sure, I mean, and now with the AECP, that's definitely something I make a homework assignment after we do the appointment. Is usually do that day as well for me. But if you're the type of recruiter who likes hand jamming SF-86s, hey, send them a digital SF-86 prior to the appointment. I used to do that before AECP, but if you still like that, have them do that before the appointment. So that way when they bring it in there, boom. But if you're doing AECP, you don't got to do much work. So you can have them do that as a homework assignment. So just thinking of creative ways to do as much administrative work prior to them coming to an appointment. If they need medical records, hey, tell them to bring their medical records in. Make sure you highlight all the dates. You can try to explain how to put it in order if they can do that. Have them bring things prepared. So that way when you meet with them, everything's quick, less work you got to do. So timelines are important.
Exactly. I mean, it's like you're saying, man, it saves time, tons of time if they have everything set up before they even come in. Like even something simple as the APT, right? If they obviously they have that done, that's 30 minutes. You're not wasting your office, having them sit in your office, take a test. Especially if they don't pass, right? They roll like a 12, you're not holding that appointment. So that's an hour that you blocked off that now is wasted. You got to try to find something to do. So having that done prior is very important. And I've come up with that argument, right? Oh, what if they cheat? What if they do all this stuff? Man, if they cheat at home, and they score whatever on the APT, it's going to come out at MEPS anyways when they take the real ASVAB or the PICAT. That's something we just can't help. Tell them, hey, don't cheat, don't use a calculator, don't use all that stuff. But I always try to get that done before the appointment. If they can't, for whatever reason, because you need to have a laptop for it, and some people don't have laptops, and all the libraries are still kind of closed a little bit. So I was like, all right, well, you're coming 30 minutes early for your appointment time, and I have the computer set up, ready to go. All I got to do is I just got to type in their code and have them take a test while I'm doing something else for 30 minutes.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. So, I mean, there's some good things to learn, especially as new recruiters, to set that foundation for yourself. It will decrease stress. You know, it will decrease the amount of time you're spending doing things, and it'll make your process more efficient. You know, and that's what brings more business sometimes too. You know, individuals like to be in structured processes where they feel like they're continuously moving and going through it. Even if they take a long time to do something, they still feel like, dang, this is really a good process. This person has me just moving through, along. I'm not waiting on this person. I hear a lot of times people are like, hey, I can't get in contact with my recruiter, or, I just, after the first appointment, I just never, heard from them. You want to always strive to have a continuous flowing process. So, wanted to talk about those things, and, our aim is to keep it short. So we will come back with another episode to this appointment series, because this is probably one of the most vital parts of this process, actually conducting and hosting appointments. Okay. So this has been High Flyer TV, where we report the real on recruiting. Thank you, Sergeant Schlickenmeyer. Until next time.